Hey everyone, and welcome to the biggest difference between a DSO and private practice. And I'm so excited for this content with my awesome friend and sponsor, Thad Miller. You're going to meet him here in a second. As always, you are watching Dental Nachos TV. Check us out at dentalnachos.com. All of the things we offer to help you increase success, decrease stress, and most of all, reduce the number of times you feel like crying inside a day. So welcome to our show, Thad Miller. Thad, orient our audience. What do you do in your daily life? We could say to help dentists cry less inside.
Well, we help our clients find opportunities when they want to transition their dental practice. And those opportunities today come in so many different forms. And that's what's great about being a dentist is you do have options. There's a lot of professions out there that are dying, and their only option was to join the hospital if you're a physician. And you've got options, which is huge.
I love what you're sharing there already. And I want to just remind people, DDS Match is a responsible group of brokers doing things the right way. Text cell to 215-543-6454 to connect for a complimentary strategy call with them. They're amazing key resources and sponsors. And I do like to highlight the positive of that. So there's so many creative opportunities for dentists to transition as owners, right? It doesn't always have to be 0 and 100%. And is that something you've seen, kind of, to use the operative word, transition over your career as a broker, where there's just a lot of creative strategies to exit your practice?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's necessarily strategies, Paul. It's more like there's options. There are multiple different types of buyers, and now more than ever. And it's critical that you plan for that well in advance. I mean, years in advance, 5 years in advance, I think is worth talking to one of our professionals across the country, just because there's so many things that if you want to go out on top, there's things you have to do. And you can't just put it on cruise control. There's got to be, you got to have your foot on the gas. You don't have to grow every year, but just certain things that make a big difference.
I think that point is so important. The classic study, 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Trident. I don't know who that 5th dentist was, but I will say that 49 out of 50 dentists just don't want to practice until their last day on earth. So you want to start paying attention to how you can go from seller to retired dentist as soon as possible. I say the day you want to start learning how to sell your practice is the day you buy it, because brings us to this topic. Every transaction is unique. And what does that mean to you, Thad, and how DDS Match, how clients that work with you benefit from your customized process? But just tell me, what every transaction is unique. What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I've done over 340 transactions just myself in 15 years. And you combine our group together, we've done thousands. So it's important to really listen to the client on what they want. And most of the time they don't know. And even if they start, they're not going to they don't know what the end is really until they meet that buyer and it clicks. Does it really sit in with them that this is going to work out?
Yeah.
And so our job is to find opportunities in any shape or form. We're not biased if it's one way or the other. We're just trying to answer the plea of our client to do it in the highest form possible, because it's personal to them, and they've got staff, they've got patients that they've taken care of. They're in a community that relies on them to provide health care. So, I think it's important that we really listen and find the fit for them.
I actually think that's such a good point. The longtime pizza place down the block from my office, Dad, which I love, they sold their pizza place to another owners, and it's not the same relationships that dentists have. So while I was kind of sad to see them sell, you can still go in there and get pizza. You don't really have a high level relationship with but dentistry is not that way. So I think your point is so important, that how customized, complex, relationship based these transitions are. Dentists have been taking care of their community. It's even me as a 46-year-old dentist, sometimes I check a hygiene patient. I say, I thought you used to be 5 years old and now they're in college. And I realize, I didn't stop aging even though I wanted to. So I think that's such a key point to the process here that you're making. Tell me this, Thad, before we get to the next question. I'm constantly informing patients the consequences of waiting too long, the consequences of inaction. You came in with part of your tooth broken. You said, Paul, I don't want to do that crown. I say, no problem, Thad. But if you're going to play in the club championship, you don't want that tooth to break the day before, and you don't want to be able not to play. And now you are motivated because you say, I don't want to miss the club championship. If you can kind of take that and just give our audience, especially sellers, the consequences of waiting too long. What have you seen gone sideways? Opportunities missed, money not realized.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we stay in our lane. Okay, we're there to find opportunities, but we work in tandem with the client's financial advisor, with their accountant, with their attorney, and if they don't have professionals that do this and work with dentists, they really need them, and we can introduce you. But we want the transition of their dental practice and the sale to be icing on top of their investments. And if they're not ready, we don't list them. We're not going to promise we're going to get, you know, 10 times EBITDA or $10 million for their practice and they can just go, sail away. We want the feedback from the people that do this with them for a living to tell them, okay, you're ready. That's one of the things, one of our taglines, are you ready? It's on some of our banners.
Yeah.
Like we want them to be ready because then it's, we focus on, we joke that we don't joke, we mean it. We start this out as a transaction, but we want it to be a transition, and if we can find the right person or the right group or the right, corporation to connect with them, they've got to really feel good about it before they move forward because there's quite the commitment in doing it either way.
I love that. We've talked before with all of your brokers, and I talk about the basketball team you have to build, right? The accountant, the attorney, the financial planner. One of your brokers made me realize something, insurance specialist. Are you maximizing your insurance fees before you transition? So all important things to this customized process. We're going to talk about buyers and sellers because maybe just give us a minute. You work for the seller and with the buyer. What does that mean to you? For the seller with the buyer?
Right. We only represent one side of the transaction. I think it's the only way to do it. Attorneys can't represent both sides of a transaction, real estate agents, I mean, it's just the right thing to do. And that's how we do it. We don't represent both sides. We represent the seller because we feel like that is our wheelhouse. That's what we do very well. Buyers, we feel like need representation from people with tax, investment, financial acumen to make sure that this practice they're buying is a best fit for them and their family moving forward. But when it comes down to what does a buyer want, I'm a big believer the most important thing they want is a crystal clear of who the seller is. The term goodwill is something that gets thrown around a lot, and it's part of the transaction and an asset allocation. But it is important that goodwill gets passed on to the new owner. And, when I go meet a client for the first time and they're meeting a potential buyer, like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to say? I'm like, just be yourself. And like, I'm like, no, you got to be yourself because that's what they're buying. I mean, they can get this equipment anywhere. They can hire staff anywhere. They can go, sign up for a bunch of insurance plans and get patients, but they really want to know who you are. And that's really what we are selling is that relationship and that team and that whole environment that's been created. And we found that, dentist patients stick with the practice. They don't want to move their chart. They have relationships across the board, not only with the dentist, but with the staff, the hygienist, the assistants, those charts are sticky, like your pizza place, if they change the recipe and it tastes a little different, they got different size pepperoni, they might go down the street. They may never come back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And also, you're making a good point. We bought a satellite practice, in 2011, and most of the patients did stay, and we transitioned the goodwill. It was a unique one. Sadly, the dentist was sick, passing away, but the office manager helped us. But sometimes the patients would say, I don't want to see the Goodman brothers. I'm going to go find a new dentist. And the office manager would sometimes say, well, you got to find a new dentist anyway. Why don't you give us a chance? And she was able to convert some of them. And I think that point is so key that you want to know who you're buying, what you're buying, an accurate representation. The theme of this talk is the biggest difference between, a DSO and private practice sale. If someone was just listening in now, Thad, and said, I want to know that answer, what is the biggest difference between a private practice and DSO sale? What would you tell them?
I'd say it's two things. It's two words, commitment and control. If you sell to a DSO, you've got to really invest in who that that group is and who you're going to be working with, because majority of the time you're going to be there 3 to 5 years, because that's part of the deal. You don't get the full outlay till the future, and there's got to be some things to happen to get the full outlay of the
I love that, the two C's. I'm a big C. So commitment,
yeah.
control. Let's really break this down so we can help a lot of people with education. And I'm going to lay up, dental pun intended, the practice. My name is Dr. Nacho, Dr. Nacho's House of Dentistry, and Guac does $2 million a year, Thad. In this scenario, let's just make me a solo practice owner with a hygienist. So I do $2 million a year, and now I could sell my practice to a private practice buyer. I could sell my practice to a DSO. Before we talk about the other C you might add in is cost, right? But before we talk about EBITDA, like my shirt says, just walk us through those differences to Paul Goodman, the $2 million a year solo GP with the DSO and the private practice route. What's that going to feel like? And
Yeah, I mean, every one of our conversations, and these are free to any of your listeners or anybody, is a confidential, complimentary conversation about more C's. Hey, how about that, Paul?
Yeah, I like that.
About where, what's important to them. And, really I sold two practices about 3 months apart, and they both did $2 million. One was to a private buyer, and the other one was to a DSO. And they were very similar. It's just the difference was the sellers wanted two different things. The one seller just wanted to work for a short period of time after the sale and move on. And the other one was looking for somebody to invest in their practice, grow the practice, bring on associates. And she wanted to focus on, what she loved about dentistry going forward. And she wanted a partner. So that, she was willing to
Tell
give.
me that the one who sold, so you got the practice, private practice owner, private practice sale, $2 million.
Hmm?
What was the commitment of time that that seller gave to the private practice buyer? 6 months, a year, 18 months? What was that commitment?
Well, honestly, they were willing to work, up to 3 months. But when we got down to it, it was almost like a turnkey. It was less than a week after
So
the
that's
sale.
the WWF tag team. One owner in,
Yeah,
one owner out. I'm off
yeah,
playing golf.
yeah.
So people who are paying attention, your spouse is a big part of this, your family's a big part of this, your team's a big part of it. When you sell to a private practice buyer, and I don't think people think about this quite enough, Thad, that staying for a short period of time has different impacts on different people. To the seller, it could be perfect. They're now in Arizona. Now the
Mhm.
team has a brand new face leading them, right? A brand new private practice face. They just need to be aware of that. Over in the DSO transition, the corporate transition, what was the time commitment that that seller had made?
Uh, at least 3 years, but it was probably going to be more like a 10-year because she was young and healthy and
So
that's
at least 3 years. She
yeah,
commits to 3 years,
right.
and it could be longer. So that seller was in a totally different mindset than
Yeah,
the first one.
correct. Correct.
So what I think we're talking about, feelings matter. The first private practice seller would not want to explore 3, 4, 5 more years of working in the practice.
Not at
And
all.
then on the other side, the corporate one, they didn't want to leave in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And it's again, we uncovered this in our first conversation, even before we list the practice. We want to kind of know. And now again, things can change. We'll market practices to find
right.
all kinds of opportunities, and we'll vet them, you know, before we even tell the client who the dentist is and where they're at. We'll get a feel for who we're talking to, and then share that back with our client. And then if they want us to share their information or share who they are, we'll do that. But if they're not interested, they're not interested. And that's part of, our goal is we want our clients to continue to do what they do best, and that's run their dental practice, and let us help find them opportunities that they can choose from, and then go through the process of investigating, is this right for them?
I love that, sure. Now, Thad, you and your awesome team, are partnering with us as sponsors, and maybe you're getting a taste of what the dental social media world is like through the Dental Nachos Facebook group. And I will share, there's a lot of irresponsible information out there. Just like when I go on my town Facebook group and someone says a crown is a scam, your dentist is trying to scam you. And I want to tell Mrs. Smith, that's not true. So when you go into the social media world, I think some of your brokers are watching, you probably go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they think that. But that's what they think, right? That's what they think. So we need to here to educate them. Let's go to the C word cost, the $2 million sale of the private practice buyer. If it's confidential, maybe you could just use round numbers. What did they sell that practice for?
To the private practice,
Private practice, yes.
Yeah. We sold that really close. I believe it was 1.9.
1.9 million.
All paid at closing in the seller's pocket.
So they get 100% at 1.9 million. Now let's talk about the DSO transition, because those are admittedly more complex. And whether this is basic to you, Thad, our audience needs to know this. So now someone says, okay, 1.9 sounds good, but I heard EBITDA, five times EBITDA, hold money in the holdco company, JV partnerships, all these things. Kind of walk us through the corporate one with the $2 million.
Yeah, it was a bit more, not dramatically more. It was, I believe it was at closing like maybe 2.7 with the potential to get maybe another $1 million.
Gotcha.
But it's obviously it takes some things to fall in place. And remember that as the now employee of the corporation, they're actually going to make less income than if they own the practice. Yeah. So you can kind of take what you're getting at closing and go off to the beach, like number one, or you can take B and you get a little bit more, but you obviously have a commitment, you're making less. So, I think that's where a good, working in tandem with their financial planners, which we did on both cases. Like we really went through the scenario with both financial advisors for the seller. They're going to do like a 5-year, plan on this. Like for the seller that sold to the corporation, like, okay, you're going to make less, but you theoretically could make more. And then if they recap and do these other things, that you can make dramatically more.
What does that mean? Tell us. In my favorite movie is Philadelphia with Denzel Washington, Tom Hanks. So Denzel, he said, explain to me like I'm a 6-year-old. So in this corporate route, and we're talking about these differences, which is just gold, the recap. So let's say she has 2.7 total value. What was she getting at close about?
Well, no, that's what she got at closing.
She got 2.7 at close.
Yeah.
And then how much like additional?
Maybe there's another $1 million out there. Potentially. I mean, the recap is where basically she got shares in the company, the new company. And if the company sells to someone else or grabs some other investment, there's some incentive for her. And really, in these corporate deals, the most important thing is you have to have representation, because they're going to come to the dentist who needs to sell or wants to be a part of this, and they're going to give the lowest deal possible to you if this is what you want to do. So you need representation to get more eyes on it and actually more offers on it, because if you are at a level where you can sell, it'd be great to have 3 or 4 people bidding on it, and then the structure of what that future money looks like is so critical. And again, it's back to this commitment. Like there's a lot of different ways to do this. You could get less money at closing. In this case, like she could have opted to get 1.5 million, but she'd get paid more over the next 5 years and have more potential if they do recap, if they do sell that. So the structure is way more important than even just the bottom line. When we sell a private practice, it's a bottom line thing. We can do planning with their tax planner to know what they're going to pay in taxes, how it plays out, and what this looks like, 6 months from now. But on the DSO, it's so complicated, and it's important to work with someone who understands those things.
And can explain it. I mean, one of the things we're sharing such value here, I have a couple more C words, but would you agree that if someone's going to get a practice loan, it's not only about the interest rate, there's more to it, right, than just the interest rate. So if someone says, oh, bank A gives me 4%, bank B 5%, bank B, you're out, bank A for sure, you would say, hold on a second, let's look at the structure of this loan, right? But and the strings attached. Well, in this corporate transition, strings attached kind of brings in a negative, but there's so many things that can happen after the closing date that people need to be aware of and how it impacts them. So would you say that it's not just about the total enterprise value from a DSO? It's not
Um,
just the
yeah,
8x EBITDA. What would you say it also is about?
I mean, it's all about the structure and how it fits in the life of the selling dentist. It really is all that. And there's obviously there's conjecture on all of it because you don't even know if they're going to recap. You don't even know what the future is going to look like of the seller. So, or of the buyer from that component. So, I think you got to go into eyes wide open, and I think you need a team in place. That's why we offer our services because we've been through this before.
And
And
you said something that the C's that I was going to talk about are compare and contrast,
Mhm.
and why that I would like to give these tips for decision making. So there's someone in my phone from this morning who said, "Hey, Paul, I don't know if I want you to advertise my associate position yet because our current associate has a really good friend that might want to work for us. So let's see if she works out first, and then we'll advertise with you." And I said, "There's some risk to that. First of all, really good friends of current employees in any situation could cause challenges. And don't you want as many options as possible to compare and contrast? That friend might not be the best fit. But what's even better is if you interview 4 people and the friend is the best fit, you now know you have context, another C word. Tell us why when someone goes, oh, I don't need to talk to you. My best friend's brother is going to buy my practice. They told me they're going to buy my practice. Why is this compare and contrast? The more options, you just said it with the DSO. Why is it so critical for seller success?
I mean, just because they haven't done it before, I mean, they just haven't, most sellers haven't done this before. And, most of our clients we work with when we get to the closing table, they're grateful for the time we spent and we earned our fee because again, this is life's work. This is not, these are relationships. Dentistry is a relationship game. It's not like your pizza parlor. I mean, I'm sure they have, staff that they love at the pizza parlor and, families that have come in for years, but, dentists are actually caring for people. I mean, that's what you took the oath to do. So I'm sure, I mean, most of the practices I work with, they care dearly about what happens next. And that's a critical piece in this whole thing is you take the time to find the right fit so you feel really good about, the legacy.
Yeah, and I will also add, I want my team to to make all these C buzzwords. Is it reasonable for a seller to think they want to create competition for their life's work? Is that whether it's a private practice sale or a DSO sale, is creating competition a valuable thing to the seller?
I don't know if it's competition. I think it's really just finding the right match. I mean, I really mean that. I mean, it is such a passion for us to feel good about what we did. I mean, we go to closings with champagne and we do a toast, and most of the time there's tears involved. So we wanted to feel like they did the right thing.
You know what really classes up a champagne thing? Bring some nachos with it next time. Bring some, but maybe I didn't frame it right. Is that to find the right match, you want to have more choices in anything in life. So you can say, if it's a DSO that says, I want you to work for 3 years at 30% of your production, but you got to do X, Y, and Z, you want to be able to compare and contrast to another DSO. And this is the
Yeah,
same. So I think that muscle, so to speak, I have the biceps of creating good options is a fit for both a private practice and DSO sale. Sellers is
absolutely.
60% of it. Anything else
Absolutely.
I missed on the successful seller traits, strategies that you wanted to highlight before we moved on?
I mean, I do think that the seller needs to put themselves in the spot of the buyer too. I mean, I think it's important for them to look back when they purchased, or when they started the practice, that they're in the shoes that the buyer's coming into this with, because the buyer's coming in with their own anxieties too. They have student loans, they're committing to this area, they're committing to
Yeah.
take a chance that these patients are going to continue to come back. So there's a lot of consternation on the buyer's side too, and that's where, like I said, pairing the buyer up with good professionals, if it's financial advisors, accountants that focus on dentists, attorneys, just to make sure that they can move forward with confidence. It just makes everything a lot smoother when we actually sit down and tell the staff what's happening and there's a new owner.
I love that. And now I like this concept bring up of happiness. I mean, for our audience and someone who is, how many brokers are on your team, Thad?
We are in 47 states, and we've got 53 people out there talking to dentists on a consistent
If I
basis.
am talking to someone who has a team that talks to as many sellers as anyone, right? You're constantly talking to sellers and you're talking to them before the transition, during the transition, and even after the transition. So have
Mhm.
you had happy sellers sell to both private practices and DSOs? Have you seen happiness in both of those transitions?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And again, it's a process, and we have our own process called the trusted transition process that we take those sellers through that. And whenever we get, off path, we try and bring them back to the transition process just to you know, keep us on track because it's a journey for sure. And, we're good at it. And this is all we do. This is all we focus on.
So let me talk to, in dental school, Thad, we're only told what goes wrong. It kind of makes us messed up in the head. So we always pay attention to what goes wrong, what goes wrong, what did you go wrong, what did you do wrong, why can't you do it better? So now tell me a little bit about unhappiness for a second, whether it was with a client you know, a story that you heard. What could cause unhappiness in these differences? Private practice unhappiness, DSO unhappiness. What is where they, because I see online, 5 of my friends sold to DSOs and they all hate it. Or my friend sold to a private practice buyer and they ruined his practice. Now, these are sometimes dramatic feelings that get thrown out there. But if you had to watch out for this unhappiness thing, what would you tell a seller out there that's listening in?
I mean, I would say it all comes down to, you know, choosing the right fit and it's just like anything, being impatient and cutting
Yes.
corners. I think, one of the things that we focus on is being incredibly transparent with the opportunities we have. We use third-party business valuations to expose anything going on in the practice. If a dentist is riding their Ferrari off, through the
Yeah.
practice or something like that, we're going to expose that on the front end. We also do a report with dental intelligence called the Clinical Opportunity Blueprint that we produce.
I want to interject. Dental Intelligence is awesome sponsor.
Yeah,
If somebody was listening saying, I want to have this conversation 5 years ahead of time, I want to be responsible, I want to listen to Thad and Paul. When they do the dental intelligence clinical opportunities, can they actually make the practice that they work in right now better and make more money over
absolutely.
the next
Oh,
year unrelated to
absolutely.
selling?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's things that they're interested in doing, but they don't know, what the output would be, they don't know what the in- income generation could be in the practice by maybe placing implants or doing more root canal or something like that. This report actually shows them. And it also shows where they're missing out on, you know, patients reappointing and things. So the clinical opportunity blueprint has been an incredible thing for us to
I
show
think that's worth it.
transparency.
Just, I mean, one of the things, and this is, we're going to spend about another 10 minutes. If people have questions, they can add them in. If you would like to get this recording, just text recording to 215-543-6454. I'm going to share how you can reach out to Thad and his team for these complimentary consultations. One of the things is like, and I've said this to sellers, because I've done with this, like, you only have to sell your practice when you want to sell your practice, but
Right.
start preparing to sell your practice before that day comes, because desperation causes disasters. That's one of my quotes. I mean, if you want to talk dentist that and you talk to your client, say, hey, when that patient calls you up and says they need to fix their teeth for their daughter's wedding, and they tell you that their daughter's wedding is 2 weeks away, how's that make you feel? And every dentist has had that feeling. It makes us feel pressure, makes us feel kind of annoyed, makes us feel worried. And they knew their daughter's wedding a year ago. So come to us a year ago. And I think if you can use that comparison, because that's the stomach feeling to us. If I had people come to me, I need to sell my practice. And the worst answer is, I go, ideally, when would you like to be transitioning? They go, yesterday. I go, you've waited way too long, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I think it's an amazing point of don't be impatient, don't be desperate. What demographics do happy sellers look for, in your opinion, in a buyer?
I think the most important thing is we're trying to get a connection when we do these meetings. One of the steps in our process is to sit there and be there with the seller and the buyer and make sure they're bringing up the things that are important in how they market to the community, how active they are in certain things. I mean, we are supplanting one person instead of the other. So they need to understand that, and that goodwill is such a critical thing that they're buying. We just got to make sure that they're asking those questions and we're really getting it out there.
I love that share. In the last few minutes, a question that I see often, Thad. Tell us what happens to the team in either sale. We're talking about the biggest differences. You talked about commitment. You talked about control. We talked about cost. You work with this team and you say, hey, team, things are going to be different, right? And a private practice sale is different than a DSO sale.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about the team. Do they get fired immediately? Do they leave? What have you seen in your travels?
No.
Someone saying, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to say to my team. Make them feel a little less anxious.
Well, one of the things we do, which I feel is somewhat unique, is we will go with the dentist when they tell their staff. And it's over usually a lunch appointment. And I walk in there and they're like, who is this guy? And I'm like, and I explain to them and I tell them, hey, it wasn't doctor's idea to not tell you this was going on. It was my idea. So you can blame me. And here's why. And I go through the reasons why, because obviously our buyers who are looking at these practices, they're working somewhere and they don't want their boss to find out they're looking to buy a practice somewhere else. And it's a small industry. And I say, you know, hygienist, you might tell a friend that you met a young dentist looking at the practice and they actually work at the practice and find out. So we do that for our clients. We'll be there with the seller when they tell them. This is when the documents are signed, when it's all, you know, papered up and ready to go. But I think it's important to do that to really let them talk about it, not in front of the new owner.
Yeah.
And basically give the points on why my client chose this person or this group to do this or this DSO. And then at the end of the day, we try and keep that gap pretty tight on, you know, them wondering who the monster is who bought their practice.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they meet the buyer and they usually have a, you know, sit down and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing. You are all, I know what you make, you know, I'm not going to change, you know, your compensation or your hours or anything like that. So we've already talked through all that, and it helps them process what's going on. And in a weird way, I enjoy that meeting. I don't know why, because we've had tears, we've had anger, we've had all kinds of things that in those.
I like that. You should wear a catcher's mask and bring donuts and nachos. You need both for that one, Dad. You got as many prizes.
I need the catcher's
gear
to catch a fly ball.
We should have a sequel or a Rocky 2s for Philadelphia of how not to tell your team, because I have stories on how not to tell the team, how not to manage it, how not. And I think that would be very, very valuable. I want to remind everyone, we're talking with Thad Miller with DDS Match, our awesome key resource and sponsor. You can text the word sell to 215-543-6454 to set up a complimentary strategy call on making one of the biggest decisions of your career. My goal, Thad, is to move people from analysis paralysis to momentum. So if someone is listening in, watching the recording, saying, okay, Paul and Thad have convinced me, I got to get started. I'm going to reach out to the DDS Match team. What happens on that strategy call? Do they need to bring their numbers? Do you just have a conversation? How does that work?
It's just a conversation. Honestly, it starts with just a phone call. And ideally, we would like that to be after hours, you know, maybe when they're sitting on their back deck or on their day off, just to kind of open up their mind on, you know, to tell us what's going on with the practice, where the opportunities are with the practice. We call it a DOS call, dangers, opportunities, and strengths.
I like that.
And it helps us to all of our DDS professionals are trained on this. And it really just helps us set a scope of where we're going to go. And there's times when I get finished with the call and I'm like, you're not ready. And this is what you should do. You should circle back with your advisor. You should circle back with, you know, some other, you know, people that we can introduce them to. And then we just stay in touch and maybe we give them tips on tidying up things. But if that call is a positive one, then we'll follow up with a follow-up from the call, and then we'll sit down and meet them at the practice after hours, you know, when there's not patients or staff around, to really kind of get into the heart of how we can help them.
Awesome, Thad. I love what you share. It's never too early to start planning to make one of the biggest decisions of your career. You can text sell to 215-543-6454 or connect with our team, the awesome Brandon Hill, who's listening in, helps sellers make decisions and buyers make decisions. You can reach out to us at transitions@dentalnachos.com. Thank you so much for sharing with me today, Thad.
Thanks, Paul. Good seeing you.